Welcome back to another episode of Straight to the Point series with your hosts, Emily Fitz and
And
Molly
Molly
Austin.
Austin. I didn't know if you were going to say it. I didn't know you were going to say it.
Okay. Oh my God.
I'm dead.
Do we keep it? Do we delete it? Oh,
I say
think
we keep it.
Okay, totally. Anyway, so today's episode is actually inspired by Simone Grace Seol. If any of you know me, you know I've never hired this woman, but I talk about her 50 times a week. And she wrote a post a couple of days ago, or maybe a week ago, by the time you listen to this episode, titled 9 Reasons Why I No Longer Offer a Business Mastermind. And it really piqued my interest because it felt like a really powerful, potent, and controversial topic that invites us to look at all sides of that decision. From the vantage point of, and these are some of the things that she mentioned, and I'll just highlight this: pay to play dynamics of the business coaching world, the cycles of consumerism that are alive and existing in these types of dynamics, being put on a pedestal as a coach that creates a space where clients come to further distrust themselves, which we're going to get into all of these. The idea that money is the only measure of success that matters, right? And business masterminds, high level business masterminds, being a breeding ground to continue that type of narrative. The idea that perhaps business breakthroughs and the biggest breakthroughs don't come from business coaching per se, she says, but the willingness to sit completely outside of the frame of business and undergo a development that was essentially spiritual and non-materialistic in nature. Mm-hmm. She also talks about the world economy and how the gross inequality that's happening in our society right now, and this idea that she could no longer justify charging multiple 5 figures so some of the most privileged people on the planet could get even wealthier. The idea that she needed to radically reconfigure her own mindset around money, which I think we both very much relate to. This model of self-trust, right? Trusting herself to drop 7 figures of recurring income in her business or income in her business. And we're going to get into the controversy with that. And then also the idea that, she didn't really want to teach an advanced business container until she knew how to center Black, brown, and non-Western bodies. Not just as, and I love that she said this, not just include them as a token check off the box gesture, which I think is also really, really important. And one of the things I think that we want to even just dive right in with is this idea. She said that, right in the front slide of this post, she said, despite it being guaranteed 7 figures of income. And what I thought was really interesting was the number of comments that I saw from people. And I'm going to quote here just really briefly. A woman said, I love this, but I can't help but question, is it because you've already made millions that allows you to stop offering high-ticket business coaching? How do we then build a sustainable business model while also being inclusive? And there was another comment too that I thought was really, really powerful. And one of the things that Simone replied back with was that, you don't have to choose choose between purpose and inclusivity over starving to death, right? And that this is also about creating a business model, and a business model she's created with multiple streams of revenue and income over a number of years, building a really sustainable business model. So there's a lot on the table that I just kind of threw at us, and we're gonna dissect all of it, because I think these are some really powerful topics, questions, and conversations around, are business masterminds on the way out? Is business coaching kind of a thing of the past, old paradigm-y? Is there a way to make it work in this new paradigm with the level of awareness that all of us are stepping into? I know myself, I haven't offered a business mastermind since end of 2022. Was I offering?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I was.
It ended in September.
Q3. Yeah,
It ended
so
in
Q4
September
I
of
didn't
22.
even offer. Q4 of 2022 I didn't even offer a business mastermind. And to be perfectly honest, I saw the desire for that type of support starting to wane. And then I was just like, I don't even know if my heart is in this type of container anymore. So yeah, some really interesting shifts. And what we'll do is we'll link the post in the show notes below. And if you're watching this on YouTube, so you can actually go and open it up and follow along while you're listening to this episode. But these are some really important topics that that we get to bring to the show. And I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I'm really grateful too. And I mean, it's so interesting because it's like the last group program I was in, last mastermind I was in was with you. And I want to say that was a really powerful container. And I would say that was probably like such an accelerated path of growth for me in learning to trust my intuition because of the questions that I was asked in that space. Like, yes, there was feedback and there was guidance, and it was a lot of like, well, what do you think? What do you think? And I think that there are really, in some cases, there are really beautiful opportunities to hold group containers with the right intentions and with it being more so question based to facilitate the person on the other end, the client, to really dive deep and see what they would come up with if they were to go inward versus outward. And simultaneously, I still see how it's going to another person to get them to ask questions too. So yeah. I see all ends of it.
Well, and I think that also brings up the topic, right, that she's posting about, which is, are these specific types of containers breeding more distrust than they're creating self-trust? And as coaches, how do we create with intention spaces that are no longer placing the coach on the pedestal and saying, I'm the one with the answers, right? And you have to come to me and invest, 5 figures or 6 figures in order to get the answers. And right, it's like,
yeah,
how do we, that to me feels like, again, there's always two sides of the responsibility, but it feels like it starts with the coach and simultaneously starts and finishes with the client in their due diligence to, anyway, it's complicated. There's so many layers.
It is. It's really intricate because it's like, what was the point that I was going to make? Yeah, it's like I see so often, and I would see when I would follow more coaches that are still in certain toxic ways of being that I don't follow anymore, almost sharing two ends of it, being like, this is a very high level mastermind and you can join. And sharing all this stuff around like, here's what I've created, and really maybe unconsciously pedestalizing themselves, but then simultaneously going to join a mastermind and being like, and don't expect me to give you, but there was like a double standard, and I'm trying to think of the exact wording around it, but it was almost like I have everything, but also don't expect a lot. It's like, what are we doing here? That just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
I'm pretty sure we did a TikTok episode on that.
Yeah, we did. Boxer. Yeah.
Oh my God, totally. Well, and and I actually was listening to another podcast episode this morning called The Genius Method by this woman, Heike Fletcher, who I really love her stuff. And she was talking about this concept of how clients will become enmeshed with their mentor. And that there's a lot of like toxic, like, she copied my stuff and my stuff looks like her stuff, right? But what's actually happening is that your client is enmeshing their brand with you because what you're teaching them resonates. But what
Yes.
happens when we do that, right, is it's actually we're not trusting ourselves and our voice and our embodied wisdom. And so it's almost like we have to ride that out and as the coach support the client in really learning their own unique voice, their own unique wisdom, that self-trust piece so that they can feel confident to create their own unique and I being an open head, open ajna in human design too, this is very common and not talked about enough. And I loved her perspective of like, my clients aren't copying me, right? Unless they're copying word for word and launching the exact same program, right? They're actually just enmeshed with my business and my brand because they haven't yet found their voice. And so I think that business masterminds too can create a dynamic
Yeah.
of unintentional copying or even business coaching, right? It's like the coach client dynamic that we've all been a part of, I think breeds a lot of the copycat type of client content, right? Because they don't know how to trust themselves or find their own voice. And I think the coach doesn't know the tools to support them in finding their own voice too. So, it's like that's also part of it.
That's a really big part of it. And I definitely moved through that and like with multiple, different coaches down to being who I'm being supported by to whose content I'm consuming the most.
Totally.
And not being a part of like, and not being in the past, because that's not my story now. I really feel like I found my own way of being in my content. I feel like we really both are in that space, and interesting how it's like, I mean, I've been like I haven't been in a container of mentorship November, December. Yeah, for like 7-8 months. And like that's really where that was able to start to happen, because it's just, yeah, it's the energy that I was around, and also those unconscious layers of not trusting myself and going, oh, well, they're sharing this and their format looks like this and this is working for them, so let me try it. And yeah, I mean, and I can see how I can see that, and I can see that from both ends too, and how there is a lot of that content out there around copycatting, and then also what you're saying is just like, you're kidding me. Please just jumped right on me. Literally.
This is why you want to watch the episode versus just listen to it.
You really want to watch the episode. Yeah.
Not to mention
and I can
we're
also
both wearing the same outfit.
Oh yeah, we forgot to say that. You really want to watch this.
We're both wearing the same outfit. Oh, literally.
I'm really glad I do want to say I'm really glad that we both got it, because we would be like, are you wearing it today? No, I want to wear it today. That would
exactly. Yeah, I came up with this harebrained idea that we should split the clothes, save money. That would have never worked. Unless we lived in the same apartment unit.
And if one of us was like different than the other, because we'd both be like, no, I want to wear it. No, I want to wear it. Oh my God. But yeah, I also see that point too around the enmeshing, and that's really a good point. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, powerful. Yeah, and what she says too about the self-trust piece, and I'll just read this because I think it's really powerful how she wrote it. She said, I developed a violent allergy to being put on a pedestal or my supposed expertise being the reason that people constantly overrode their inner knowing and organic processes. Despite my repeated and emphatic teachings about sovereignty and me not being the answer giver, mastermind dynamics seemed to endlessly engender a Simone knows best or coach knows best dynamic. that both my clients and I had to actively, constantly fight against. At some point, I lost the appetite to keep up the fight and decided to kill the room altogether. And I think we see this a lot in certain, right, big
Right.
coaching conglomerate
Right.
rooms.
Right.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
the
this
self-trust piece is everything.
well, and this is a coach who's even aware of this piece and has actively tried working through it clearly a lot with the women in her space. So this is somebody who's aware and is wanting to lean into these parts and look at it. And this isn't even touching on the containers and the coaches who aren't even going here. So
Totally.
we don't know, and we don't know, like we don't know and we don't know what the inside of those containers look like and what the basis of and the foundation of what those containers are. And I think that's interesting that clearly she's put a lot of effort into trying to shift this paradigm, and it's still happening to the point where it was like, wow, I really have to put this down.
Yeah. Well, and that was another one of her points too, was to actually take space and spaciousness for her to work on her own money mindset. Another one of the things that she said, I needed space to radically reconfigure the way I think about money, business, and non-oppressive commerce, stepping outside of many of the inherited assumptions and practices of feral capitalism. And I couldn't do that while continuing to do what I've been doing by default. And I've noticed too, it's like there's a part of me that has been celebrating money wins less. And yet there's still a part of me that's entangled with the inherited belief systems that money wins supersede all others. And I know that that's utter and total bullshit. And it's layered because I know that celebrating those types of wins will attract the attention of clients, future clients, potential clients.
Yeah.
More so than, right? Like, and same for probably intuitive eating and weight loss, right? She lost 30 pounds, might attract more attention than, she had a subtle breakthrough on our call the other day, and it allowed her to stay consistent with the commitment that she made for herself.
Exactly.
To some people, that might be like, oh my God, wow, that's everything.
Right.
But to the masses, it's like, I'd rather lose 30 pounds, right? Because they don't quite understand the value of those subtle micro shifts that are so powerful and yet so important. And so it's like, we're also being not required, but invited to simultaneously untangle these pieces within ourselves. And I think creating distance from the product that perpetuates that cycle, is a really powerful opportunity to then go within self to start to unwind those stories, those belief systems.
I 100% agree. And even with sharing those wins, because I really hear you, and that's something I've really had to work on, is what kind of wins I'm sharing. Because then we also have to think about, well, what happens when we do share those wins that are all external results based, weight loss based, money based, whatever the thing is. And then the person buys into our container, and then God bless you. And then the person,
could you hear that?
No.
Okay, good.
I saw you sneeze though. He's probably sneezed for me too. I've been holding my sneeze in. But it's true, because what happens when we're sharing those wins and then a person buys into our container because all they're seeing are those wins, and then they're coming in having to work through a whole process because, oh my God, why am I not getting these wins and XYZ? And then we're sitting there going, oh no, it's not about that. But simultaneously, that's all we're posting about.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that creates a dynamic between, coach and client, that it becomes almost unrealistic expectations placed upon the container that
Mhm.
then puts the coach under pressure to deliver the results that everybody else is getting, while simultaneously having to face a client who's then working through the belief system that somehow I'm uniquely wrong and bad because I'm not getting the results that you've been sharing about, right? I'm not hitting those 30K months. I'm not having six-figure launches, right? Or why haven't
Mhm.
I haven't even been able to lose 5 pounds, let alone 25
Mhm.
pounds, right?
Yep.
And then the client is sitting with the piece of like, well, it must be me, right? There must be
Exactly.
something wrong with me when it has nothing to do with that. And so as the coach, what are we perpetuating in these
Exactly.
containers by marketing them in
Exactly.
certain ways?
Yeah. And it's like if we want to post, hey, my client had a 30K month, and it's not that we're saying don't share those things. It's just
Totally.
looking at the whole picture of, are you only posting those things that's because that's going to, or I know that's going to attract clients, but then
Yes.
that just creates a really sticky dynamic. And
Yeah.
it's just perpetuating those same feelings and stories of lack and scarcity and limitation that we are actually projecting onto the client through what we're sharing by what we're only sharing. So it's
Totally.
like, yes, share the wins. They made this amount of money this month. They lost X amount of pounds. And what else? Share the micro wins, share the small things. And I really feel that that's also the story that we're really here to rewrite too, is it's also up to us, just the same way that people on social media have learned to be like, oh my God, they had 100K months, to have that same reaction. That's not totally our, responsibility, but a part of it is to share the small things just the same way we share the other things, and to also talk about why it's so important that we are sharing those micro wins,
Yeah.
and how that's not only like a part of, oh, what's a part of this container, this program, but also how we are really working on reworking and shifting the different paradigms in the coaching world in general. Because I
Hmm.
think as the coaching industry is shifting, it's not just about what we can offer in our business anymore, in our specific niche. It's about how we are being a part of this shift and this change. And
Yes.
I think that's going to speak to a lot of people.
Yes. And also, as always, our relationship to it, our energy behind it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
again, these are like the subtle, intricate layers. It's not just what you post, it's the energy behind the post, right? Or the sharing of the win, right? Am I
Yeah.
doing it because I feel like this is the thing I have to do in order to get the clients to say yes and invest with me? Or am I doing it because I'm genuinely excited about this client's win? And it feels so good to celebrate them in this way. And simultaneously, I am so excited about all of my other clients and all of them, little micro successes that they're creating, because I also know that each one of those micro successes is the very thing that leads to the bigger win that is inevitable if they just continue to stick with it, right? And also,
Yes.
like you said, taking responsibility for our part in it, which is a piggyback off of last week's conversation,
Mm-hmm.
is who's responsible. And
Right.
the truth is we're both parties are responsible for
Always.
their piece and part always.
Always. Always. Well,
Yeah.
because we can also share all the wins and all the different spectrums of the wins, and somebody could still come and be extremely triggered around, oh, well, I saw you post this thing once, and they can still be triggered by that. And that doesn't mean that it was because you shouldn't have posted that thing. That's
Yeah.
right. And so it's just looking at every situation individually and keeping an open mind, and
Yeah.
just getting curious, like you're saying, not only about what we're posting, but the energetics too behind why we're posting it.
Totally.
Which is such a confronting question sometimes,
Hmm. Hmm.
a lot of the times.
Yeah, because it really makes you pause and think about the motivation behind the decision.
Right.
And yeah, that can be confronting because it asks you to
Mm-hmm.
look at what's motivating me right now and then drop any judgments you have about what's motivating you.
Yes.
Like I went through a process with a client the other day that was really beautiful. And it was like, there was some very real anger underneath the surface that was existing in her, right? But we're taught to meet it with unconditional love so quickly that we bypass the very real anger that's existing versus allowing the anger to be present, which also requires us to dismantle the good girl inside of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And actually give the anger and the judgment a voice to express itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And versus shunning it or telling that part of ourselves that it's wrong or bad, right? So it's like it's asking us to release any bits of shame or judgment we have around our own judgment, which is really just ego judging itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can move into, I can unconditionally love this part of myself, which returns us to wholeness, right? And then we have access to more of our power. But that's the process when we're actually looking at some of these really subtle, intricate layers within ourselves first, and then within the industry second, because we can't make the changes externally within the industry if we're not willing to make the changes internally within ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to continue to create high level mastermind containers that perpetuate the same cycle. Not that those are wrong, right? Again, if you're running a mastermind, this is not an attack on you in any way, shape, or form. We just want to open up the conversation to bring more awareness around what are the containers that we're creating? What cycles are they perpetuating in the industry? What narrative are we being a part of? Right. And are we willing to sit with our own pieces and parts and the subtle, intricate layers of being kind of in the messy middle of a completely new paradigm shift?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and something that also just came through too was like, I remember the point in time in my business where I was really, really in my ego. Like, oh my God, everybody loves me. This is the best. And how that energy can also be brought into mastermind containers because it's feeding the part of us that's always wanted that kind of attention. Or that's always wanted people to pedestalize us in some way. So that's also a big piece. That I personally see or perceive from my own lens is still very present in the industry and comes from the wounding of significance. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is it's the ego. I mean, it's the mechanism of the ego that we were all born with. The ego thrives off of significance. I want to feel significant. I want to be significant, right? What it is it's creates that separation, right? It's like the the belief that you're separate from everything else. And it's not a wrong or bad part of you to want significance. It's just a part of you. And with more awareness comes more power to integrate that part, right? And recognize that, okay, it's just a part of me. It's not shameful, right? And I can want that. And I can also understand that maybe that is not the truth, right? Or when I think of like the truth, I'm talking about like unconditional love, right? The truth versus my truth, which is subjective through my lens of needing to be important.
Yeah.
And
that could be just like the most like unconscious layer at first too, until you allow yourself to get curious and look a little deeper. I mean, they're like you're saying, none of it's bad, none of it's wrong. It's literally, again, the part of us that we were all created with. And it's also why we're walking this walk as coaches too, to look at these parts. Like our soul chose this for a reason. Even the parts that are the hardest to look at some points in time, the most unconscious layers that have been playing out. We chose this. And like you're saying, we get to really do that through a lens of compassion and love for ourselves.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and I think the last sort of piece to speak into in this conversation too is this topic, right, that was posed in the comments around, well, of course you can drop a 7-figure mastermind because you already have a sustainable business. But what about those of us who are just trying to get our business off the ground, right? Or what about those of us who rely on paying team and mortgages and childcare, and need to provide this type of business mastermind, or high ticket program of sorts? And then the battle within self of like, am I perpetuating the cycle of then creating rooms where only the privileged can come and invest and become even more wealthy than they are, right? So, and one of the things that Simone said, and I do want to try to find this, because I think it's important to read her reply. She said, no matter what phase of business you're in, the choice is never between starve to death and choose from principle. I have robust income streams outside of business masterminds because I've been working hard to build a healthy business from community-based principles for years. It's not like I got here via exploitation and am able to stop exploitation because I now have money. And I think that's really interesting.
It is really interesting, and I really like the way that there's a lot going on in those comments, and I really see and hear where she's coming from. I do, and I also see and hear where the other women in the comments are coming from too, because from, I would say, the majority of my perspective, even as we're talking about these, even as we're talking about the shadow sides of these different containers, possibly, I can really see the side of the women who are like, well, you could say that, and that could also be from some of my own stuff too, so I could also see that.
Well, and we're always filtering everything through our own lens.
Exactly. And I think that through my lens at this point in time, I could see both sides, and I can also understand women coming from that place of, well, of course you can say this because you already have $1 million in your bank account. So I get it. I get both sides. I see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think there is a zipped up, button up, right or wrong answer. I think it's
there never is.
I think it's just sitting with the, again, sitting with the layers around both perspectives and both sides. And I do love what she says around, what if the focus becomes building a healthy, sustainable, community-based business that doesn't need to thrive? Like, God, source creator, it doesn't want us to have to sacrifice, right? So it's like, it's not about making the choice so black and white between, well, you either can't, you have to follow your principles or starve to death and have a business. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you get to be wealthy, abundant, prosperous, and be in alignment and in integrity with the level of awareness that you have at this current juncture in your reality.
Exactly. And from what she's saying, can also be done in healthy community-based spaces and programs. It's just, again, the energetics behind those things. And I really respect the way that she's taking a step back so she can really look at all of these parts on a deeper level. And I really see her being a person. I mean, she already is such a voice in the coaching industry. And I'm really excited to see where she moves from here. I do feel that there's going to be some sort of community-based space that she creates from what she's learning and integrating in this period of time for herself, which I'm excited to see kind of what that shifts into and how that's going to, again, continue to not only pinpoint, here's what's not working, but also the creator's mindset and what she's going to create from here. I think will be really cool to see.
Well, and I think we're seeing this across the board too, right? Of these quote unquote high level coaches who've already created a lot of wealth for themselves, creating more accessible investment opportunities. So like, I myself invested in this 21-day abundance portal. And it was like a $55 investment, right? And the whole concept was, I don't feel like there should be a gatekeeper between the people who are where they're at right now in their journey, being able to access some of these other information that people are only selling for a high ticket investment, right? So, and then there's also well, of course you can do that because you've already made millions of dollars, right? So it's like, again, we bring the conversation that addresses all sides to the table without having all the answers, without knowing the perfect way forward, without knowing exactly how to address every single one of these concepts. But one of my favorite quotes is from Melissa Nobrega, and she said, freedom lies in the stillness and the questioning, not in the answer. Mm-hmm. So what if it's not even about having the answer or knowing the perfect way forward, or whether or not to continue a business mastermind or launch one or don't launch one, right? What if it's not actually in the concrete answer for yourself, but it's in the curiosity and the questioning that you now get to bring into your world, that cracks open a new level of awareness that allows maybe a new style of program to drop in that feels in alignment, in integrity, and gets to be abundantly prosperous for you and for your clients.
Absolutely. Well, and again, as I was talking about when we were first kicking off this episode, was like the most powerful spaces I've been in a group space was all about the questions. It wasn't even necessarily about getting the answer. It was about the questions that I was receiving and then getting able to sit with for myself. And so in so many different ways, it's the questioning, the stillness, the sitting with it versus the answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So good. Oh, thanks for joining us on another episode of Straight to the Point series. We'll see you guys next week. If you're not already following us, you can come drop in with us over on Instagram, send us a DM, let us know if you loved this episode, what came up for you, if you're triggered, if you're not triggered, if you're excited, if you're curious, if it brought a new level of awareness. We want to hear from you. Yeah, definitely reach out to us. Straight to the Point series, TO, or is it number 2? Straight to number 2. Yeah.
Number 2.
Never mind. Straight to number 2, the Point series on Instagram and TikTok. And you can connect with me at the.emilyfitz.
And I'm at the Truly Molly. And we will see you next time.
Bye.